Well, here we go. Good morning. All right, we're here at the end of the trimester. And so as we wait for individuals to pop into our classroom here, I posed a question out here. What was your highlight for the weekend? For me, it was continually watching the Mandalorian series. Anything Star Wars related, I'm going to get sucked in. Which always poses the question, as my wife says, how many times can I watch a Star Wars movie? And I usually say there isn't a limit to it. I can watch it as many times as possible with that. And then, of course, I do like watching hockey, and so Gophers men's hockey team swept Penn State, which lately has had their number in hockey. So if you want, you can put into the chat, to tell me what your highlight of the weekend was. Okay. So just pop in there. That'd be great. So today, as we are progressing here, we are pretty much wrapping up the Chinese Civil War. And I know it's gone fast and furious, but that's the time constraints that we deal with the 6-week hexmester, as we call it, and we just get the nitty-gritty details of it. And so we've been looking at the causes, the practice, and now the effects of it. And so end of the hexmester is with us. Tomorrow you're going to have an assessment, and that will open up tomorrow. So you'll have most of the day to work on it, and just remember that it will be a time limit. Near the end of the session, I'll talk a little bit about what that assessment looks like. Okay, so anyone have any questions before we start? You can always put it in the chat as well.
How's your morning been?
My morning's actually been pretty good. It's a great looking day out there. Been able to accomplish what I need to so far this morning. So it's been a good morning. And I've had a couple Diet Cokes. That's even better. All right. So with that, want to start today. You'll notice in the chat, and you can also find in Schoology in week 6, there's a Google form. And we're going to use that kind of like to guide us with this activity on the Chinese Civil War. We're going to watch a little clip here. I'm not going to watch the whole thing. We'll probably actually watch a little bit of it again when we get to studying of Mao in the authoritarian unit. And so we're going to watch perhaps about 18 minutes of this video clip here. And what it's going to do is really give us some highlights on some of the early changes to Chinese society that will occur under the communists. After all, the communists are going to succeed in this civil war here. So please click on the link that you have either in the chat, or you can find it in Schoology. And work on that while we're watching the video. It's about 18 minutes here. And you may even want to have your the impact of the Chinese Civil War activity out too. And so that video clip can also maybe help you respond to maybe some of the questions that you'll see on that matrix about that focus on those different individuals. In regards to the Chinese Civil War and how it impacted them. All right. So I'm going to share with you in a moment here this video. We'll watch it, and then we'll debrief it, and I'll use that Google form kind of as debriefing it. So let me share my screen here. Let's see if it works this week.
October 1949. Victory celebrations in Beijing. Over 30 years after the Soviet Revolution, communism makes a second great advance. The country with the largest population in the world now has a communist government. Photographer Hu Bo is on the platform.
The square was full of excited people, chanting, "Long live Chairman Mao." But there was really only one thing on my mind, and that was to capture those precious moments with my camera and leave them to future generations. It was a special day for China. After thousands of years of struggle, we were liberated at last. What a joy.
The crowds in Tiananmen Square hear Mao Zedong proclaim a new beginning. Mao says China will now be free of inequality, poverty, and foreign domination. Almost overnight, 1/5 of the world's people become part of the greatest experiment in mass mobilization of the 20th century. They will be told to work, live, and think in a new way. But in a series of cataclysmic social experiments, millions will suffer or die as they attempt the great leap toward Mao's new society. For the first half of the 20th century, most Chinese still lived in ways that had remained unchanged for generations. Four out of 5 worked on the land in desperate poverty. Most were in debt to landowners or moneylenders. In the west of China, Hu Benshu's family were landless laborers.
It was a hard life. We had very little to live on. I wove cloth day and night to make ends meet. We could only just scrape by. In the past, there was justice for the rich, but nothing for the poor. Who cared about us then? Nobody. You can't believe how badly the poor were treated.
The need to tackle rural poverty and modernize was recognized in the 1920s. President Chiang Kai-shek re-established a central government, ending the turmoil between rival warlords. His Nationalist Party drew support from Chinese businessmen and the landowners in the countryside. Foreigners were allowed to keep their privileged hold over trade and finance. And the nationalists believed that in time, capitalism would spread its wealth out to the other China, beyond Shanghai and the coastal cities.
Nighttime in dear old Shanghai, then I'm dancing, sweetheart, with you.
But the gulf between the lives of the middle class and the masses of peasants and laborers remained as wide as ever. Jing Jingzhe was married to a leading Shanghai businessman.
I learned how to dance and used to go out with my husband to social functions. He enjoyed playing mahjong and always took a lot of trouble about how he dressed when he went out.
As China began to industrialize, low wages and poor conditions increased the social divide. After the success of the Russian Revolution, some looked to China's newly formed Communist Party for a radical change that could shake China out of its lethargy. Starting in Shanghai, the Communists attempted to stir up the city's factory workers. But they were savagely suppressed by Chiang Kai-shek's forces. Those who survived fled to the countryside and were pursued across China. 80,000 set out on what came to be called the Long March. Fewer than 8,000 survived. From their camp in the caves of Yan'an, their leader Mao Zedong planned a new kind of revolution that would spring from the countryside rather than from the workers in the cities. In a short time, he said, several 100 million peasants will rise like a tornado or a tempest. During the Second World War, the Communists and Nationalists joined forces to fight the Japanese invaders. But when the war ended, a full-scale civil war between the two sides resumed. Mao promised the peasants land reform, and his troops treated them well.
When the soldiers first came to our village, I was really scared of them. I didn't even dare sleep in my room. They told me they were the People's Liberation Army, and that I shouldn't be frightened. They slept in the street and were extremely well behaved.
By the autumn of 1949, the Communists had driven the Nationalists out of all the major cities. They fled to the island of Taiwan, taking the country's gold reserves with them. Mao Zedong took over a bankrupt, devastated country and immediately set out to transform it. Mao now held more power than any leader since the emperors. He promised a China that could stand on its own feet alongside the other world powers. Mao's version of communism was to be the foundation for a purer, fairer, more progressive state than the one that had emerged in the Soviet Union. It was to be a revolution in which the peasants were to take the leading role. Activists would explain the ideas of class identity and class struggle to every village and workplace, and incite the peasants to speak up against enemies of the people. Chinese were now bombarded with propaganda. Traveling projection teams took films to the remotest areas, bringing the message of active socialism. As the revolutionary program began, the peasants were the first to benefit. They were granted the land reform they'd wanted for so long. It was the party's plan that they should seem to make the change themselves. Speak Bitterness meetings were held, in which the landlords and others linked to the defeated nationalists were confronted and denounced by the peasants.
We were told to get together and ask the landlords to return land to us. We stated how much they should return and how they should return it. There was a denunciation meeting every day.
Local party secretary Lua Shifa helped whip up feeling in his village.
The first thing we had to do was to bring down the landlords. What we did was persuade the tenant farmers to denounce them. At the public meeting, they would explain how they couldn't afford to pay back the rent every year, or how they had to take out high-interest loans to pay it off. People around the stage sympathized with the poor peasant stories, and they'd weep.
政府接受了群众的要求，判决罪犯李志仁的死刑，坚决与人民为敌的反革命分子一定受到人民严厉的制裁。
Hundreds of thousands were killed.
经过轰轰烈烈的土地改革，他们的苦日子从此一去不回头了。今天，他们真正的翻身做了土地的主人。
The class warfare was less vicious in the cities. The communists tried to win the support of the managers and technicians the revolution needed to keep the mills and plants running, and to assimilate the capitalist owners who had not left with the nationalists. Propaganda showed businessmen handing the deeds of their companies over to the state, and then celebrating with improbable glee the new socialist dawn. Jian Guodong, district party secretary, heard what was really happening.
By day, they pretended to support the party. But at night, behind closed doors, they'd gather their families around them and cry, bemoaning the fact that everything they'd worked for would soon be lost. When we realized this, we decided to recruit capitalists who sympathize with the party.
The Jing family in Shanghai decided it was best to cooperate. Mrs. Jing took part in a film explaining her new outlook to other wives.
金锦芝在小组会上说，过去丈夫不能掌握自己的命运，做妻子的命运更是没有保障。大家走上社会主义的光明大道，就可以放心了。
After liberation, the communists didn't like businesses like my husband's, so he was in trouble. Then we studied the party's policies and decided that joint ownership with the state was the only solution.
But for those who resisted, the changeover could be bloody. Chi Youyi worked at a Beijing factory.
The big bosses in our factory were executed immediately. The less important ones were forced to reform through hard labor. We were asked to keep an eye on them. We hated them so much, we beat them if they didn't work hard enough. That's the way they treated us. In the past, they'd been the masters. Now, we were.
Women were given new rights at work and in marriage. The painful tradition of foot binding was abolished, and women were helped in the drive to end illiteracy. Gao Yuying from a village near Beijing was first a pupil and then a teacher.
Once I'd learned how, I could teach others to read. I didn't have a blackboard, so I used a wooden door. I wrote words on it and they copied them. Some of them had their babies with them, breastfeeding and studying at the same time. I can tell you, it was really hard.
创造出了许多好办法，这种每人一块小黑板的学习方法。当他们去地里干活的时候，就把自己的小黑板插在地头上，结合生产劳动来熟读生字，真正做到了学以致用。
To clean up China's dirt and disease, the communists launched mass campaigns and expected everyone to take part. Propaganda films were used to set the pace. Millions were inoculated against the epidemic diseases that had racked China. War was waged on old habits.
This is what is 老爷爷，集体吐痰不文明，还会传染各种疾病呢。对对。 最好下次吐痰的时候要吐在手架里、纸里或者垃圾箱里。
好，好，以后我们一定要注意了，一定要注意了。
老爷爷再见。
哦，再见了，再见。
所以这是有关我们每一个人的事情，要求人人都动起手来。
The pressure was inescapable. Party activists checked up on their neighbors' housework. Zhen Fuqin from the local street committee went from house to house.
We used to say, "Do you love your country?" The country is calling on you to carry out the public health campaign. Get on with it. When they heard this, people said, "Ah, if we don't do it well, that means we don't love our country." We used to go up the lane to check on people's housework, to see if they'd done it properly. We'd examine the tables to see if they were dusty. If everything was neat and tidy, that would be fine. If not, I would tell the women to do it better.
All right, so there we go. Government tells you that you need to clean your room. Imagine if the government came into your room now and saw the state of your room and perhaps gave you some suggestions. That'd be wow. All right. So like I had said, that there was a Google form. And so and the Google form will look like something like this. All right, so let's take a time here to respond to it. You know, it shouldn't take you that long. One, it's asking you in what ways did the Civil War lead to societal changes? So based on that little video clip, you should be able to jot down a few thoughts on that. And in the end, did the Civil War transform Chinese society? And that's, you know, really what we're trying to get at here when we're looking at the impact of a civil war in general. Does it transform society? So did the Civil War transform society, yes or no? And then explain your rationale to the previous question. So let's take a couple minutes here. Let's answer those questions. All right, and again, you can find this either in week 6 folder, or you could find it in the chat. Take a moment. And while you're jotting down or responding to it, it's always interesting when you hear the voice of the leader. You have this idea, this image, and then you hear the voice. And so does the voice match up with the leader? You know, it's always something that we can think about, or you can think about, at least I think about it. And then when got to that point where they're talking about the Long March and then being in Yuan, I was hoping to kind of see a scene there where Mao is playing table tennis. We didn't quite get to that scene. We didn't see that in there. Would have been nice with it. So again here, let's take some moments here to respond to those few questions. Again, can be done without actually doing the homework assignment. The homework assignment, though, can help. And hopefully that video clip will also help you complete the homework assignment. All right. While we're waiting for people to respond, does anyone have like any initial questions or reactions to just that 18, 20-minute video clip? Anything that kind of sparked an interest or you have questions about? Okay. So just looking back on here, you can definitely make the claim that the Chinese Civil War did result in a transformation of society. That would have been true if the nationalists would have won under Chiang Kai-shek or Jiang Zeshi. You could probably say Chinese society was also going to be transformed. The question was, how radical would it be? And so Chinese society will be transformed under the communists. The title had talked about a great leap. And so this was something that China was definitely doing. It was taking this great leap, moving from really a agrarian-based society that really wasn't modernized compared to the other large industrialized nations. And so this definitely was going to be a great leap. And so in the 1950s, you're going to see this big transformation occur. And at the end of the 1950s, excuse me, they will try their great leap forward policy. This was going to be an economic policy of industrialization and agriculture, and it did turn into be a cataclysmic disaster for China. Millions of people are going to die as a result of that policy. And so one thing I think is, highlighted in one thing that in that 20 minutes was how the communists were able to get people behind the program. It definitely spoke to their base, the peasants, but then also getting the workers behind their program as well, and in some ways carry out the policies, the Speak Bitterness campaign. And, you'll see that periodically in China in the different decades where you have these various campaigns with the idea to find who are the opposition, find out who is not fully on board with the communist revolutionary ideas, and just root them out, and in some cases isolate them, in some cases execute them. But the Chinese communist leadership found a way to get the people behind their programs and to, in some ways, be the agents of those programs there. And so if you haven't finished out the Google form, please do. That's kind of like your little exit out of here. So you want to make sure that you're doing that. When I look in the chat here, it seems like when we do get recordings of our voice, it seems like we are a little higher, and sometimes we don't like how our voices sound. But you can make that claim about many of the world leaders, is their voice seems to be a little bit higher, or just doesn't seem to kind of match them with that. All right, so please finish this up. There's a few of you that still need to do that. Anyone have any questions about the video or about the transformation of Chinese society?
Couldn't the landowners and businessmen have gone to neighboring countries to try and escape?
Yeah, they could have. The thing though is when they escape, they are losing everything. They're losing their land holdings. They're losing their business. But at least they still are alive. Greater risk is staying in communist China and trying to somehow find a way to accommodate and to survive in that regime. It's going to be very difficult. So you do see that some do cooperate, especially the business owners. With the landowners themselves, if they do survive the bitterness campaigns, they aren't going to own their land. As you can see, that the land was going to be redistributed among the peasants, or cooperatives are going to be formed here. And early on, the peasants are getting land ownership, but we're going to start seeing the rise of collective farms in China, which is in some ways very similar to what you saw in the Soviet Union. And so the peasants themselves are going to lose some of that individual land ownership as well. So where do some of the land owners and business owners, those who did leave, where do they go? They either went to Taiwan, but some of them are also going to come to Western countries like the United States. And in some cases, we are going to encourage them to leave China and come to the United States. And it's part of our Cold War policy that we'll have. All right, good question. Anyone else have a question? All right, so last thing here, before I cut you loose here, tomorrow we will have the Chinese Civil War. We'll have a quick check-in tomorrow as well. But tomorrow we have the Chinese Civil War assessment, and it's going to be worth 20 points. It's going to be multiple choice. There's going to be some true false in there as well. Please take a look at that review sheet. You'll have a couple attempts at it for success. And the exam is going to open up around 9:30. So you have 9:30 to 11:59 to get the exam done. So that's pretty much what we're looking at for the format there. All right, any questions related to that? All right, so if you hadn't done the Google form, please do. Work on completing the impact of the Chinese Civil War questions, or that matrix. Get that taken care of. So you can have some time to prep for that exam tomorrow and finish the trimester on a good note. Also remember, tomorrow we have advisory. So you want to make sure that you are checking in with your advisor tomorrow morning. All right. So with that, have a good day.